Check out the big brand on Eric Singleton, who could have run in for the touchdown, but was smart enough to slide and let Georgia Tech run out the clock to knock off previously undefeated Miami and throw Miami's chances of making the college football playoff into something like flux. This is going to be very interesting in the way that the College Football Playoff Selection Committee views this loss. And as much as I think that people were sleeping on Georgia Tech will also tell you, hey, we beaten 2 top 10 teams this season alone. Florida State turns out to not be that good, but they had the number next to their name. I think many of us who had been watching Miami play have been, hey, the Cardiac Canes can't keep getting away with this, dog. Like, you're going down double digits to almost everybody you play, and then you're coming back with a vengeance in the third, fourth quarter in particular. And Georgia Tech really did a great job of controlling the rock, man. I mean, we're also not just controlling the rock, but getting off the field on third down. They held Miami to 3 of 10 on third down, and they converted on third down, 9 of 14, 372 total yards for Georgia Tech, but only 99 passing, because that's just not what they were going to do. You knew that if you kept giving Miami possessions, Cam Ward was likely to pick you apart. And it wasn't as if he wasn't good in this. He's 25 of 39 for 348 with 3 TDs. Took 3 sacks, no picks though. And Damian Martinez was fine, 15 for 81. This game really was about how good Georgia Tech was at running the football against a Miami defense that it looked suspect at times, and about how much it really mattered who was at quarterback when you were going to make a move. Like Haynes King being able to run the ball and Philo being able to throw the ball turns out to be a recipe for knocking off the Hurricanes, who now dropped to 5-1 and are in a really good space to still make the ACC championship game. But I would be shocked to find out that this is a top 10 program when the selection committee comes out. If for no other reason than I think SMU is going to move up here off of the loss to Miami, because you took this loss to Georgia Tech, who is unranked, who moves to 6-4, right? However, you also have to take into account who is Southern Methodist actually lost to, right? Southern Methodist lost to an undefeated and top 10 ranked BYU by 3 points. Southern Methodist now looks like the best team in the ACC, while at 5-1, you have Clemson and Miami, and then 5-0, half game in front, basically, you have SMU, who now figures to be in the ACC championship game against Miami. If Miami wins out, we'll see, right? I'm also looking at this going, if you are Brent Key and you've done this job at Georgia Tech, man, like the sky's the limit for you, because we have for years been looking at Georgia Tech going, they all right? Every now and again, it felt like Paul Johnson would have them doing something in that triple option. But since Megatron, nobody really feared them. And I would even say didn't really fear them when they were good enough to make New Year's Six bowl games. This team, though, you know that at any point, Georgia Tech could run the ball or they can stop you. Knowing that in and of itself, I think Miami didn't come in here with hubris after what had happened against Duke. But when you go down like you do against these teams, you can't expect to keep coming back like this, man. And I feel like most of this is going to be put at the defense's feet. But I'm also going, a lot of this is Mario Cristobal, right? Something about the mentality of his football team doesn't come out on fire. They don't come out just looking to set the tone and let everybody know that they are amazing. It's another reason why, looking at Miami, looking at Indiana, you're going, okay, one of these teams looks better than the other. Once again, I expect Indiana will move up. I had them at number 6. They had them at number 8. I would not be surprised to find out that they moved them to the spot where I have them. And then we'll see what happens with Texas, who stopped a mud hole in Florida and walked it dry, and same Texas team that lost to Georgia. Like, in that 3-9 range is going to be very interesting to look at, especially after we get the result from LSU, Alabama, and Georgia, Ole Miss. But, man, what a tremendously cool win for Georgia Tech, who upset Florida State, as I mentioned, in Dublin, Ireland. But this one, I don't think many people saw coming. When you were looking at this Miami team and you were looking at their schedule, you didn't expect Georgia Tech to be the one where somebody storms the field on them, especially after what they did to Florida to start the year, right? 41-17. And that Florida team has turned out to be better than they looked, but not as good. And now we're looking at the comeback they had against Louisville, 52-45. That Louisville comeback means a lot for them because Louisville was able to beat Clemson. Florida State, they beat them 36-14. Duke, they come back and they put up 53 in that game, right? 53-31. And now you got games left against Wake Forest and Syracuse that you should win. Those Wake Forest is not good, and Syracuse is maybe as good as Georgia Tech, right? If not better, because I think they're when they played earlier this year, I want to say that. Let me check this before I get this wrong. Yeah, Syracuse beat Georgia Tech, so perhaps they're capable of beating Miami. Even so, you're still in a spot where you can make the college football playoff. You probably won't be in the 4 spot, right? But you could still be one of those teams. This really what this does is open up the door for the Big 12 to move into the 3 spot and get out of what I'm thinking of the dunker spot in the 4 spot, because the 4 spot means that you're the weakest of the highest ranked Power 4 champions, right? Which means that you're going to face probably the 5 seed. The 5 seed is going to get the 12 seed. In this case right now, it would be Ohio State, who would face Boise State, probably beat stop a mud hole in Boise State, walk it dry. And then the 4 seed, in this case, the ACC champ, Miami, SMU, Clemson, would need to play Ohio State. And that's a better football game for all of us. But also, it moves BYU out of the spot of being in dunker, right? If you get to the 3rd spot, I still think you got a really great spot coming out of whoever wins that matchup where you're going to need to play. But you also get the bye week back. This is going to upset the top 5. We know I'm curious about is whether or not it upsets the top 15. How far down do you put Miami after this loss? Again, I mentioned Southern Methodist's losses to BYU, and you take into account LSU losing to USC, but also beating Ole Miss, but losing to A&M. What do you do with that? How strong do you think Miami would be in the SEC is basically the question that we're asking. How strong do you think it would be in the Big 10? Do you think it'd be good enough to win the Big 12? These are all really important questions that I think are going to need answers. But right now, if you're Georgia Tech, your season just became alive once again. You got to bowl eligibility. You knocked off one of the 5 best teams in college football. They were undefeated. And now the Yellow Jackets get to absolutely point to Brent Key and say, this might be the best coach this side of Rhett Lashlee. Like, I was thinking about this. Who's the ACC coach of the year right now? Feels like it's Rhett Lashlee. It was going to be Mario Cristobal, but right now it feels like Rhett Lashlee. If SMU takes a loss somewhere along the way, I got a hard time not looking at what Brent Key has done at Georgia Tech and not saying, my goodness, man, who else would be able to do that? Same thing like I'm looking at SEC and Vanderbilt with Clark Lee. Like, I'm going to have a hard time seeing somebody not give the award to that guy after what they have been able to accomplish so far this season with a roster that we didn't think was going to be competitive. That turns out to not just be competitive, but good enough to knock off the number 1 team in the country and to prove it's not a fluke. They're winning football games at Vandy, just as they're winning football games at Georgia Tech. These are a couple of programs that we expect to be at the bottom of each one of these Power 4 conferences, but with the transfer portal and name, image, and likeness, the volatility of the sport has really been just cool to watch, but has led to games like this one. It's led to upsets like this one. It's not parity, but I do believe that it's cool as hell to see these games come down to the wire, and that, it's still, you don't get to fall behind everybody and expect to win, right? That's what Miami had been able to do. In as far as what this does for the College Football Playoff Selection Committee, yeah, man, you got some things to figure out. Especially Tennessee, I think, is going to do just fine against Mississippi State. Is this a better football team than Tennessee? I don't know. We'll figure it out, though.